The moment Ethan Morgan pushed through the saloon doors in Miles City, Montana, blood dripping from a wound on his arm and a wanted poster with his face crumpled in his pocket, he knew his luck had finally run out. It was late September of 1883, and the whole territory was buzzing with news of the train robbery he had pulled off 3 days prior. The reward money had doubled, and every lawman from here to Billings would be watching for him. He needed to disappear, to blend in just long enough to figure out his next move. But as his eyes adjusted to the dim lamplight of the saloon, they landed on something that made every rational thought flee his mind. Standing behind the bar, pouring whiskey for a grizzled rancher, was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Delilah Clarke wiped down the Mahi counter with practiced efficiency, her auburn hair pinned back in a simple but elegant style that showed off the graceful curve of her neck. She wore a modest green dress that somehow made her hazel eyes seem to glow like precious stones. At 22 years old, she had been working at the Silver Spur Saloon for 3 years, ever since her father died and left her with nothing but debts and broken promises. She had learned to read men quickly in this job, to spot trouble before it found her, and the stranger who just walked in was trouble incarnate. Ethan was 25, tall and lean with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar ran along his jawline, a memento from a gunfight 2 years back that he barely survived. He moved with the kind of fluid grace that came from years of living on the edge, always ready to draw, always watching. But right now, all he was watching was her. He made his way to the bar, trying not to favor his injured arm, and slid onto a stool. Up close, she was even more striking. There was intelligence in her eyes and something else, a sadness maybe, or a weariness that matched his own. "Whiskey," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "The good stuff, if you have it." Delilah studied him for a moment, her gaze taking in the dust on his clothes, the way he held himself, the barely concealed wound. She had seen enough outlaws to recognize one when he sat in front of her, but there was something different about this one. Something in his eyes that was not just dangerous but lost. "We have it," she said, reaching for a bottle on the top shelf. "But it will cost you." "Everything worth having does," Ethan replied, and was rewarded with the faintest hint of a smile. She poured him a generous measure and set the glass in front of him. Their fingers brushed as he reached for it, and the contact sent an unexpected jolt through both of them. Delilah pulled her hand back quickly, confused by her reaction. She had been touched by countless men in this saloon, usually far more deliberately and inappropriately, and she had never felt anything but disgust or indifference. This was different. Ethan took a long drink, welcoming the burn. He should leave. He should finish this whiskey and ride out before anyone recognized him. But he could not seem to make himself move. "You knew in town?" Delilah asked, even though she knew she should not engage. Something about him made her curious. "Just passing through," Ethan said. "Though it is a mighty fine town you have got here." "You are a terrible liar," Delilah said, but there was no accusation in her tone, just simple observation. "You are running from something." Ethan looked at her sharply. "What makes you say that?" "Because I have been serving drinks to running men for 3 years. They all have the same look, like they are always watching the door, always ready to bolt." She paused, then added more softly, "I know that look because I see it in the mirror every morning." The honesty in her words struck something deep in Ethan's chest. He found himself wanting to know her story, to understand what had put that shadow in her eyes. "What are you running from?" he asked. "Who says I am running? Maybe I am just stuck." She picked up another glass and began polishing it, a nervous habit. "My father died owing money to half the town. I have been working here ever since, trying to pay it off. Some debts you cannot outrun." Before Ethan could respond, the saloon doors burst open with enough force to rattle the walls. 3 men strode in, and Ethan recognized the lead one immediately. Jack Holloway, a bounty hunter with a reputation for bringing in his marks, dead more often than alive. Ethan's hand instinctively moved toward his gun, but Delilah's voice stopped him. "Do not," she said quietly but firmly. "Not in here. Too many innocent people." She was right. The saloon was crowded with ranch hands and townsfolk enjoying their Saturday night. A gunfight would be a bloodbath. Ethan forced himself to relax, to turn back to his drink as if he had not a care in the world. Holloway scanned the room with predatory eyes. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders, with a cruel mouth and cold blue eyes. The 2 men with him were clearly hired muscle, all guns and no brain. "I am looking for someone," Holloway announced loudly. "Outlaw named Ethan Morgan. There is a reward out for him, $2,000. Anyone who has information better speak up now." The saloon went quiet. Ethan kept his eyes on his whiskey glass, every muscle tensed. He could feel Delilah standing very still beside him. Holloway started making his way through the room, studying each face. Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before he was recognized. He had maybe 30 seconds to decide what to do. Run and risk everyone here. Stay and get captured or killed. Neither option was good. Then Delilah did something that shocked him to his core. As Holloway approached the bar, she moved smoothly around it and slipped her arm through Ethan's, leaning against him with easy familiarity. "Evening, Mr. Holloway," she said with a bright smile. "Looking for someone." Holloway's eyes narrowed as he looked at Ethan. "Who is this?" "This is my fiancé, Elijah Matthews," Delilah said without missing a beat. "He just rode in from Glendive to visit me. Elijah, this is Jack Holloway. He does some work for the territorial marshal sometimes." Ethan played along, slipping his arm around Delilah's waist and pulling her close. The feel of her against him was distracting in the best and worst way. "Pleasure," he said, keeping his voice neutral. Holloway studied them both, suspicion clear on his face. "I have not heard anything about you being engaged, Delilah." "Well, we have been keeping it quiet," Delilah said, her fingers tightening on Ethan's arm in what might have been nervousness or warning. "You know how people talk. We wanted to be sure before we made any announcements." "That's so." Holloway stepped closer, and Ethan could smell the sweat and gunpowder on him. "Seems awful convenient, him showing up right when I am looking for an outlaw." "Montana is a big territory," Delilah said. "Surely you do not suspect every man who rides into town." For a long moment, Holloway said nothing. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a wanted poster. Ethan's face stared back from the paper, rendered in crude but recognizable lines. The bounty hunter held it up, comparing it to Ethan's face. Ethan forced himself to remain calm, to keep breathing normally. Delilah pressed closer to him, and he could feel her heart racing. "The man in this poster has a scar," Holloway said slowly, pointing to the marking on the drawing. "So does half the territory," Delilah said. "Men get scars. It does not make them outlaws." Holloway looked like he wanted to argue, but the saloon owner, a portly man named Herman, called out from across the room. "Leave them be, Holloway. Delilah is a good girl. She would not take up with no outlaw." Other voices murmured agreement. Delilah was well liked in Miles City, one of the few respectable things about the Silver Spur. People looked out for her. Finally, reluctantly, Holloway stepped back. "I will be watching," he said to Ethan. "If I find out you are not who she says you are, I will come back. And I will not be so polite next time." He and his men left, but the tension in the saloon remained. Delilah stayed pressed against Ethan for a few more seconds, then stepped away quickly, her cheeks flushed. "Why did you do that?" Ethan asked quietly. Delilah busied herself with straightening bottles behind the bar, not meeting his eyes. "I do not know," she admitted. "I saw you sitting there and I saw him coming and I could not let him take you, not without knowing who you really are." "I am exactly what that poster says I am," Ethan said. "I rob trains and banks. I have killed men. I am not a good person, Delilah." The sound of her name on his lips made her shiver. She finally looked at him, really looked at him. "Maybe not, but I do not think you are a bad one either. Bad men do not worry about innocent people getting hurt in crossfire." "You do not know me." "No," she agreed, "but I would like to." Those simple words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Ethan knew he should leave right now, should get as far from this woman as possible before he brought more trouble down on her head. But he found himself saying, "I have got nowhere to stay tonight. Holloway will be watching the hotels." Delilah hesitated for only a moment. "I have a small house on the edge of town. Used to be my father's. You can stay there tonight, but you have to leave before dawn, and you have to tell me the truth. All of it." "Why are you helping me?" she smiled sadly. "Because someone should have helped my father when he needed it." Maybe if they had, he would still be alive. Ethan felt something crack in his chest, some wall he had built up over years of running and fighting. "All right," he said. "I will tell you everything." The rest of Delilah's shift passed in a blur. Ethan stayed at the bar, nursing his whiskey and watching her work. She moved with practiced grace, deflecting unwanted advances with firm politeness, laughing at jokes that probably were not funny, making everyone feel welcome. She was good at this, he realized, good at making people feel seen. It was a rare gift. When the clock struck 11, Delilah untied her apron and hung it behind the bar. She had a brief conversation with Herman, who kept glancing at Ethan with obvious suspicion but did not say anything. Then she was walking toward him, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "Ready?" she asked. Ethan nodded and followed her out into the cool Montana night. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by lamplight. Miles City was settling down for the evening, though music and laughter still spilled from a few establishments. They walked in silence for several minutes, taking back streets and avoiding the main thoroughfares. Delilah's house was small and tidy, set back from the road with a little garden out front. It was not much, but it was clearly cared for. She unlocked the door and gestured for Ethan to enter. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. A main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a small bedroom visible through a doorway. Everything was neat and clean, with little personal touches that spoke of Delilah's personality. A vase of wildflowers on the table. Books stacked carefully on a shelf. A quilt in shades of blue and green draped over the single chair. "Sit," Delilah said, pointing to the chair. "Let me look at that arm." Ethan had almost forgotten about the wound. Adrenaline had kept the pain at bay, but now that he was safe, it throbbed with insistent aching. He shrugged off his coat and rolled up his sleeve, revealing a deep gash along his forearm. Delilah sucked in a breath. "That needs stitches." "I know. I was hoping to get them somewhere less conspicuous." "I can do it," Delilah said. She disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a medical kit. "My mother was a nurse. She taught me before she died." Ethan watched as she laid out supplies with efficient movements. Needle, thread, clean cloth, a bottle of something that looked like whiskey but was probably meant for cleaning wounds. "This will hurt," she warned. "I am used to pain." She poured the liquid over the wound, and Ethan hissed despite himself. Delilah's hands were gentle but sure as she began stitching. The pain was sharp and bright, but Ethan focused on her face instead. Up close, he could see the faint dusting of freckles across her nose, the way her teeth worried at her lower lip as she concentrated. Tell me your story, she said quietly as she worked. Start at the beginning. So Ethan did. He told her about growing up in Texas, the youngest son of a poor rancher who drank too much and hit too hard. He told her about running away at 15, falling in with a bad crowd, learning to shoot and steal and survive. He told her about the things he had done, the lines he had crossed, the man he had become. I am not proud of it, he said, but I do not know how to be anyone else. Why did you rob that train? Delilah asked, tying off the last stitch. Because a man named Carson hired me to. He said it was carrying payroll for a mining company, easy money. But when we got the safe open, it was not payroll. It was personal belongings. Family heirlooms, wedding rings, things people were transporting west to start new lives. Ethan's jaw tightened. Carson did not care, wanted to take it all anyway. I refused. We fought. I won, but his men got away. Now they are telling everyone I killed him and took everything. Did you kill him? Yes, Ethan said flatly. But only because he drew on me first. It was self-defense, not murder. Not that it matters. No one is going to believe an outlaw's word. Delilah finished bandaging his arm and sat back. I believe you. Those 3 words hit Ethan harder than any bullet. He looked at her, this woman who had known him for less than 3 hours, who had every reason to turn him in or throw him out, and he saw something in her eyes that terrified him. Trust, maybe even the beginning of something more. Why? He asked hoarsely. Because I am a good judge of character. I have to be, working where I do, and because you gave back the things you stole, did you not? That is why you only have enough money for whiskey instead of a hotel room. Ethan felt his throat tighten. She was too perceptive by half. I left it all at the train station in Billings with a note for the railroad to return it. Stupid, probably. But I could not keep it. Those things meant something to people. Delilah reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm and soft against his calloused palm. That is not the action of a bad man, Ethan Morgan. That is the action of someone who still has a conscience, who still cares about right and wrong. It does not change what I am. Maybe not. But maybe it is a start to changing who you will be. They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, something profound and terrifying passing between them. Then Delilah stood, breaking the spell. You should get some rest, she said. You can take the bed. I will sleep out here. I am not taking your bed. Yes, you are. You are injured and exhausted. I will be fine in the chair. They argued about it for a few minutes, but Delilah was stubborn. Finally, Ethan gave in, too tired to fight any more. He lay down on her bed, surrounded by the scent of lavender and something uniquely her, and fell into the first peaceful sleep he had had in years. When he woke, dawn light was filtering through the window and the smell of coffee filled the air. He sat up slowly, testing his injured arm. It still hurt, but the stitches held firm. In the main room he could hear Delilah moving around. He found her at the stove, frying eggs and bacon. She had changed into a simple blue dress, and her hair was loose around her shoulders, making her look younger and more vulnerable. Morning, she said with a smile. I thought you might be hungry. They ate breakfast together at her small table, and it felt shockingly domestic, normal, like they were any couple sharing a meal instead of an outlaw and the woman harboring him. You should go soon, Delilah said reluctantly. Holloway will be back, and if he finds you here. I know. Ethan set down his fork. Delilah, I cannot thank you enough for what you did. You saved my life. Then do not waste it, she said fiercely. Get out of Montana. Go somewhere they do not know your face. Start over. It is not that simple. Why not? Because I do not want to leave you, Ethan thought but did not say. Instead, he asked, what about you? You said you are stuck here because of debts. How much do you owe? Delilah hesitated, then said, about $800. It might as well be 8,000 for all the chance I have of paying it off on saloon wages. Ethan stood abruptly. Wait here. He went to where he had left his saddlebags and dug through them until he found what he was looking for. It was not much, just the remains of his last legitimate job working as a ranch hand before everything went to hell. But it was something. He returned to the table and placed $300 in front of Delilah. Her eyes went wide. I cannot take this, she said immediately. Yes, you can. Consider it payment for saving my life and patching me up. Ethan, this is too much. It is not enough, he said. But it is all I have right now. Take it. Use it to pay down your debts. You deserve to be freed, Delilah. You deserve to have a choice about your life. Tears filled her eyes. Why are you doing this? Because you make me want to be better, he thought. Because in one night you have shown me more kindness than I have known in 10 years. Because I am falling for you and I do not even understand how, out loud, he said. Because someone should have helped you sooner. Delilah stood and walked around the table. Before Ethan could react, she wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. He froze for a moment, then slowly returned the embrace. She fit perfectly against him, her head tucked under his chin, and he had the sudden fierce wish that he could stay like this forever. But he could not. His presence put her in danger, so after a long moment he gently pulled away. I have to go, he said. I know. They looked at each other, and Ethan saw his own longing reflected in her eyes. He raised his hand and cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over her soft skin. Delilah leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed. If I were a different man, Ethan said softly, I would ask if I could stay. I would ask if you might want to build something with me, some kind of life. But I am who I am, and I would only bring you trouble. Delilah opened her eyes, and they were blazing with emotion. Then change. Be that different man. You said yourself you do not know how to be anyone else, but maybe you just have not tried. Maybe you have never had a reason to. And now you do, or you could, if you wanted enough. Ethan's heart was pounding. Everything in him wanted to say yes, to promise her anything. But he had spent too many years being realistic to give in to fantasy now. It is not that easy, he said. I've got bounty hunters after me. Holloway is not going to give up, and even if I could shake him, there are others. My face is on wanted posters from here to Texas. So we leave, Delilah said, and the we in that sentence made Ethan's breath catch. We go somewhere new, somewhere you are not known. You can change your name, change your life. People do it all the time out here. You would do that, give up everything here to run with an outlaw. I am not giving up anything, Delilah said. I am choosing something for the first time in my life. I am choosing you, Ethan, if you will have me. Ethan stared at her, this brave, beautiful woman who was offering him something he had never thought he could have. Hope, a future, love. You barely know me, he said, but his resistance was crumbling. I know enough. I know you have a good heart buried under all that hurt and anger. I know you make me feel more alive than I have in years. I know that when I look at you, I see someone worth saving, worth fighting for. She took his hands in hers. You make me want to be brave, Ethan, to take a risk. Say you will let me. Say you will try. Ethan pulled her close and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss, but one filled with desperation and need and the weight of everything they were both feeling. Delilah responded with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. All right, he whispered. All right, we will try, but we have to be smart about it. Holloway is not going to stop looking for me, and if we run now, it will be obvious. We need a plan. Delilah's smile was radiant. Then let us make one. They spent the next hour plotting. Delilah would continue working at the saloon as if nothing had changed, which would keep suspicion off her. Ethan would lay low at her house during the day and only venture out after dark. Meanwhile, they would gather supplies and information, figure out the best route out of Montana and where they could go to start fresh. "I have family in Oregon," Delilah said. "My mother's sister. We have not spoken in years, but she always said I was welcome if I needed a place. It is far enough that no one should connect me to you." "Oregon," Ethan repeated, testing the word. He had never been that far west. "That is a long journey." "Several weeks at least, maybe longer depending on weather and how much we have to avoid main roads." "We will make it work," Delilah said with confidence. "Together." That word again. Together. Ethan was not used to thinking in terms of we and us and together, but he found he liked it. Over the next 3 days, they fell into a careful routine. Delilah worked her shifts at the saloon, deflecting questions about her mysterious fiancé with practiced ease. The story had spread through town, embellished with each retelling, until most people believed she and Ethan had been corresponding for months and were planning a spring wedding. Holloway remained in town, watching and waiting. He was convinced Ethan was his man, but without proof, he could not do anything. The territorial marshal had warned him about harassing innocent citizens, and even a bounty hunter had to mind the law sometimes. Meanwhile, Ethan spent his days at Delilah's house, reading her books and helping with small repairs around the property. He fixed a loose board on the porch, patched a leak in the roof, tended her garden. Simple, honest work that soothed something in him. In the evenings, after Delilah came home, they would cook dinner together and talk for hours. Ethan learned that Delilah had always wanted to be a teacher, that she loved Shakespeare and had a beautiful singing voice she rarely used anymore. She learned that Ethan could play the harmonica, that he had a dry sense of humor, and that he slept with a gun under his pillow but wished he did not have to. On the 3rd night, after dinner, they sat together on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Delilah's head rested on Ethan's shoulder, his arm around her waist. "I have been thinking," Delilah said quietly, "about what we will do when we get to Oregon. I could probably get a job teaching in one of the small towns. You could work on a ranch or in lumber. We could build a real life." "As husband and wife?" Ethan asked. Delilah lifted her head to look at him. "Is that what you want?" "More than I have ever wanted anything," Ethan admitted. "But I would understand if you wanted to wait, until I have proven I can be the man you deserve." "You already are," Delilah said and kissed him softly. "But we can take our time, figure things out as we go." That night, Ethan held her close and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work, but fate had other plans. On the 4th day, Ethan woke to the sound of horses and shouting outside. He was on his feet instantly, gun in hand, moving to the window. What he saw made his blood run cold. Holloway was there with a dozen men, all armed, surrounding the house. The bounty hunter sat on his horse with a satisfied smirk, and next to him was one of Carson's former gang members. The bastard must have recognized Ethan that first night and told Holloway everything. "Ethan Morgan," Holloway called out, "I know you are in there. Come out peaceful and I will make sure you get a fair trial." They both knew that was a lie. Ethan would be dead before he reached any courthouse. Delilah appeared in the bedroom doorway, her face pale but composed. She had thrown a robe over her nightgown and her hair was loose and tangled from sleep. "What do we do?" she asked. Ethan's mind raced. They were outnumbered and surrounded. Even if he could shoot his way out, which was unlikely, Delilah would be caught in the crossfire. He could not risk her. "You stay here," he said. "I will go out there and surrender. You tell them I forced you to help me, that you were afraid I would hurt you if you did not. They will believe it." "No," Delilah said flatly. "I am not letting you sacrifice yourself. You do not have a choice. Yes, I do. And I choose to fight for us. Before Ethan could stop her, Delilah ran to a trapdoor in the floor that Ethan had not even noticed. She pulled it open, revealing a small cellar below. My father used this during the war, she explained quickly. It has a tunnel that leads out past the garden, comes up near the creek. We can escape while they are focused on the house. Delilah, no arguments. We are in this together, remember? Outside, Holloway was getting impatient. You have got 1 minute, Morgan, then we are coming in. Ethan made a split-second decision. He grabbed Delilah's hand and they descended into the cellar. The tunnel was narrow and dark, smelling of earth and old wood, but it was sound. They crawled on hands and knees, moving as quickly as they could while trying to stay quiet. Behind them, they heard the crash of the front door being kicked in, then Holloway's angry shout when he realized the house was empty. It would not take him long to find the cellar, to figure out where they went. They emerged near the creek, just as Delilah had promised. Ethan's horse was stabled nearby, a piece of luck he sent up a silent prayer of thanks for. But there was only one horse, and with Holloway and his men on their tail, riding double would slow them down too much. Take the horse, Delilah said immediately. Go, I will be fine. I will tell them, not a chance, Ethan said. We are both going, or neither of us is. He helped her onto the horse, then swung up behind her. It was not ideal, but it would have to do. They set off at a gallop, following the creek north. Behind them, they could hear shouting as the men discovered their escape route. They rode hard for an hour, pushing the horse to its limits. The Montana landscape blurred around them, all golden grassland and distant mountains. Ethan kept checking behind them, watching for pursuit. It came sooner than he hoped. A cloud of dust in the distance, horses and riders coming fast. They are gaining, he told Delilah grimly. What do we do? Ethan scanned the terrain ahead. There in the distance, he could see what looked like rougher country. Hills and ravines where they might be able to lose their pursuers, or at least find somewhere defensible to make a stand. Hold on, he said, and urged the horse toward the hills. They reached the broken country just as the sun was climbing toward noon. The horse was lathered and heaving, exhausted from the brutal pace. Ethan found a deep ravine with good cover and steep walls that would be hard to approach from above. He helped Delilah down, then quickly unsaddled the horse and set it loose. It would have a better chance without them, and they needed to move on foot now anyway. Can you shoot? He asked Delilah, pulling his spare revolver from his saddlebag. Well enough, she said, taking the gun with steady hands. My father taught me. Of course he did, Ethan thought with a mixture of admiration and fear. This brave, remarkable woman. They took up positions behind a tumble of rocks and waited. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Then the riders appeared at the mouth of the ravine, Holloway and 6 others. The rest must have split off to search other directions. This is not going to end well, Ethan muttered. Maybe not, Delilah said, but we will face it together. Holloway spotted them and called his men to a halt. He was too smart to ride into an obvious trap. Instead, he dismounted and used his horse as cover, his men following suit. Morgan, he shouted. You are only making this worse for yourself. Give up now and I will let the girl go. He is lying, Ethan told Delilah. They will arrest you for harboring a fugitive. I know, Delilah said calmly, but they will have to catch us first. Ethan found himself smiling despite the dire situation. She was incredible. For a long moment nothing happened. Both sides waited, neither willing to make the first move. Then one of Holloway's men got impatient and fired a shot. It ricocheted off the rocks above Ethan's head, sending chips of stone flying. After that, all hell broke loose. Gunfire echoed through the ravine as both sides exchanged shots. Ethan fired carefully, making each bullet count. He hit one man in the shoulder, sending him spinning away. Delilah proved she had not been lying about her shooting skills, keeping Holloway's men pinned down, but they were still outnumbered and running out of ammunition. Ethan counted his remaining bullets. 6 shots. Delilah probably had 5. Against 6 men still standing, it was not good odds. Then he heard something that made his heart sink. Hoofbeats. The rest of Holloway's men were arriving, drawn by the gunfire. In minutes, they would be completely surrounded. "We need to move," Ethan said. "Now." He grabbed Delilah's hand, and they ran deeper into the ravine, bullets kicking up dust at their heels. The ravine twisted and turned, and they took every opportunity to change direction, trying to lose their pursuers in the maze of rock. They rounded a corner and nearly ran straight into a dead end. A sheer rock wall rose 30 feet above them, unclimbable. They were trapped. "Ethan," Delilah said, her voice tight with fear. He turned, pulling her close, his gun raised and ready. Behind them, they could hear voices getting closer. This was it, the end of the line. But then Delilah gasped and pointed. There, partially hidden by a fall of rock, was a narrow opening. A cave, maybe, or another way through. They squeezed through the opening just as Holloway's men reached the dead end. The opening led to a series of small caves, dark and cool after the bright sunlight. Ethan led the way, one hand on the wall, the other holding Delilah's. The cave system was more extensive than he had hoped. They moved through it as quickly as they dared, listening for pursuit. But the opening had been well hidden, and it seemed Holloway's men had not found it yet. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, they saw light ahead. Another opening, this one leading out to a different part of the hills entirely. They emerged into bright sunshine, blinked against the glare, and found themselves looking down at a small valley with a creek running through it. And camped by that creek was a group of Native Americans. Ethan froze, his hand tightening on his gun. Relations between white settlers and the tribes in Montana had been tense for years. He had heard stories of violence on both sides, of massacres and retributions. He had no idea if these people would be friendly or hostile, but they had nowhere else to go. Behind them, they could hear Holloway's men still searching. It was risk the camp below or go back and face certain capture. "Stay close," he told Delilah, and they began making their way down the hillside. They were spotted almost immediately. Several men from the camp came to meet them, rifles ready but not raised. They were Crow, Ethan realized, recognizing the style of their clothing and the words they spoke to each other. One man stepped forward, older than the others, with gray threading through his long black hair. He studied them for a long moment, his dark eyes taking in their disheveled appearance, their weapons, the desperation that must have been clear on their faces. Then he spoke in accented but clear English. "You are being hunted." It was not a question. Ethan nodded. "Yes." "By a bounty hunter and his men. They are just over that ridge." "Why do they hunt you?" Ethan hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I am an outlaw, or I was. I am trying to change, to start a new life, but my past has caught up with me." The old man looked at Delilah. "And you, are you his captive?" "No," Delilah said firmly. "I am with him by choice. We are together." Something shifted in the old man's expression. He spoke to the others in Crow, a lengthy exchange that Ethan could not follow. Then he turned back to them. "I am called Two Hawks. This is my family, my people. We have no love for bounty hunters or the law that sends them. Too often, they do not distinguish between the guilty and the innocent." He paused. "You may stay here while the hunters pass, but if you bring violence to this camp, we will not be so welcoming." "We understand," Ethan said, relief flooding through him. "Thank you." Two Hawks nodded and gestured for them to follow. They were led to a place where they could sit and rest, out of sight from the hillside. Women brought them water and food, simple but nourishing. No one spoke to them, but there was no hostility either, just a cautious acceptance. They spent the rest of the day there, listening to the distant sounds of Holloway's men searching the hills. As the sun began to set, 2 hawks returned. "Your hunters have given up for now," he said. "They will likely return to the town, wait for you to surface, but they will be watching all the main roads." "Do you know of any other way out of the territory?" Ethan asked. 2 hawks considered this. "There are old trails through the mountains, paths my people have used for generations. They are difficult, especially this late in the season. Snow comes early to the high country, but it is possible for those determined enough." "Could you show us?" Delilah asked. "Please. We are trying to get to Oregon to start over. We just need a chance." 2 hawks looked between them, and Ethan saw something soften in his weathered face. "You remind me of myself when I was young," he said to Ethan. "And my wife." He gestured to an elderly woman sitting by one of the fires, her hair white as snow but her eyes still bright. "We too were from different worlds, had to fight to be together. Love is worth fighting for." He stood. "Rest tonight. In the morning my grandson will guide you to the old trails. He knows them better than anyone. It will be hard traveling, but you will avoid the hunters." "We cannot thank you enough," Delilah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank me by living well," 2 hawks said simply. "By being worthy of the second chance you are being given." That night they were given blankets and a place to sleep near one of the fires. Ethan lay awake for a long time, Delilah curled against his side, watching the stars wheel overhead. He thought about everything that had led him to this moment. All the mistakes, the violence, the years of running. And now, because of a chance meeting in a saloon and the bravery of an incredible woman, he had a shot at redemption. He would not waste it. In the morning, they were awakened by a young man who introduced himself as Running Wolf, 2 hawks' grandson. He was perhaps 20, lean and wiry, with keen eyes that missed nothing. "We should leave soon," he said, "before the hunters begin searching again." They gathered their few belongings. 2 hawks approached one more time, pressing a small leather pouch into Ethan's hand. "For your journey," he said. "Dried meat and herbs, not much, but it will help." "We have nothing to give you in return," Ethan said, ashamed. "You gave us your trust," 2 hawks replied. "In these times that is a rare gift. Go with our blessing." They followed Running Wolf out of the valley and into the mountains. The terrain was rough, just as 2 hawks had warned. They climbed steep trails that sometimes seemed to disappear entirely, crossed rushing streams on fallen logs, and pushed through dense pine forests where the air smelled of sap and earth. Running Wolf moved with the easy confidence of someone who had traveled these paths all his life. He spoke little, but when he did, it was to point out things they needed to know. A place where the trail forked, a landmark to watch for, a stream with good water. They traveled for 3 days through the mountains. The nights were cold, frost forming on their blankets by morning. But the days were clear and beautiful, the aspens turning gold and the sky an impossible blue. On the 3rd evening, Running Wolf led them to a high meadow with a view that stretched for miles. In the distance, they could see the lay of the land dropping away to the west. "That is Idaho," Running Wolf said, pointing. "Beyond that, Oregon. The trails from here are easier, more traveled. You should be safe now." "You are leaving us?" Delilah asked. Running Wolf nodded. "My grandfather asked me to see you safely away from the hunters. That is done. The rest of your journey is yours alone." Ethan shook the young man's hand. "We owe you and your family more than we can say." Running Wolf smiled slightly. "My grandfather is right. Love is worth fighting for. I hope you find the life you are seeking." Then he was gone, disappearing back into the trees as silently as he had come. Ethan and Delilah stood in the meadow as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. They were alone now, truly on their own, and the enormity of what they were undertaking began to sink in. "Are you scared?" Delilah asked quietly, terrified. Ethan admitted, "I have never tried to be anything other than what I am. I do not know if I can change." Delilah took his face in her hands, making him look at her. "You already have changed." The Ethan Morgan on that wanted poster would never have given back those stolen belongings, would never have worried about innocent people getting hurt, would never have opened his heart to me. You are not that man anymore. I want to believe that. Then do. I believe it. That should be enough to start. Ethan kissed her slow and deep, pouring everything he felt into it. When they broke apart, he said, "Marry me." Delilah blinked. "What? Marry me? Right here, right now. No preacher, no witnesses, just us and these mountains and the sky. We will make our promises to each other, and that will be enough." "Ethan, I know it is not legal or official. We can do that part later when we reach Oregon, but I do not want to wait. I want you to know right now that I am choosing you, that I am promising to be the man you believe I can be." Tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." They stood facing each other in that mountain meadow, the last light of day gilding everything in gold. Ethan took Delilah's hands in his, and they spoke their vows. "I promise to love you," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "To protect you and provide for you, to be honest with you, even when it is hard, to work every day to be worthy of the gift you have given me." "I promise to love you," Delilah said, her voice steady despite her tears. "To stand beside you through whatever comes, to believe in you when you doubt yourself, to build a life with you that we can both be proud of." They had no rings, so Ethan took a piece of leather cord from his saddlebag and tied it around Delilah's finger. She did the same for him. It was simple, crude even, but it meant everything. "I love you," Ethan said, the words feeling strange on his tongue, like a language he had never learned to speak. But they were true, more true than anything he had ever said. "I love you too," Delilah whispered and kissed him. They made camp in the meadow that night, their first as husband and wife in the eyes of God if not the law. They lay together under a blanket of stars, and for the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly at peace. The journey to Oregon took another 3 weeks. They traveled slowly, carefully, avoiding towns and sticking to back roads. They camped under the stars, cooked over small fires, and talked about their future. "I want a house with a garden," Delilah said one night. "Nothing fancy, just somewhere we can grow our own food and maybe have some chickens." "I can build that," Ethan said. "I am not much of a carpenter, but I can learn." "And children?" Delilah asked hesitantly. "Do you want them?" Ethan had never thought much about children. In his old life they had been an impossibility, something other people had. But now, imagining a little boy with Delilah's eyes or a little girl with her mother's smile, he found he wanted it very much. "Yeah," he said. "I do. A whole houseful if you are willing." Delilah laughed. "Let us start with one and see how it goes." As they traveled, Ethan taught Delilah things he had learned from years of living rough. How to track animals, how to find north by the stars, how to start a fire with flint and steel. In turn, she taught him things he had never thought to learn. How to read poetry, how to appreciate the small beauties of the world, how to hope. They encountered other travelers on the road, and each time Ethan tensed, expecting recognition. But no one looked twice at them. They were just another couple heading west, seeking their fortune like thousands of others. Ethan had grown a beard during their travels, changing his appearance enough that he no longer matched the wanted posters. And without his gun belt and outlaw swagger, he looked like any other settler. When they finally crossed into Oregon in late October, Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. They had made it. Against all odds, they had actually made it. Delilah's aunt lived in a small town called Cascade, nestled in the foothills of the mountains. It was a logging town, prosperous and growing, with a main street lined with shops and a white-painted church at one end. Delilah's aunt, Margaret, was a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, who welcomed them with open arms despite not having seen her niece in years. She listened to their story, or the edited version of it that left out the parts about outlaws and bounty hunters, and offered them a place to stay while they got on their feet. "The logging company is always looking for workers," Margaret said to Ethan over dinner that first night. "It is hard work, but it pays well. And the school is looking for a teacher," she added to Delilah. "The last one got married and moved to Portland. It seemed almost too good to be true, but over the following weeks they discovered it was real." Ethan was hired by the logging company and proved to be a hard worker, strong and reliable. Delilah interviewed for the teaching position and was offered it on the spot. They were married officially at the church, a small ceremony with Margaret and a few of her friends as witnesses. Ethan wore a borrowed suit that did not quite fit, and Delilah wore a simple white dress that Margaret helped her make. But when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Ethan kissed his bride, he felt like the richest man in the world. With their combined income, they were able to save money quickly. By spring, they had enough for a down payment on a small piece of land just outside town. The land came with a dilapidated cabin that was barely standing, but Ethan saw potential. He spent his evenings and weekends rebuilding the cabin, learning carpentry from the other men at the logging company. Delilah helped when she could, and slowly, the cabin transformed into a real home. They added a proper bedroom, a kitchen with a real stove, even a small parlor where Delilah could read and Ethan could play his harmonica. By summer, they were ready to move in. Margaret came to help them settle, and she wept with happiness to see her niece so content. "Your mother would be proud," she told Delilah. "You have built a good life here." That night, alone in their new home, Ethan and Delilah lay in their bed listening to the sounds of the Oregon wilderness. An owl hooted somewhere nearby. The wind whispered through the pines. "Are you happy?" Ethan asked. "More than I ever thought possible," Delilah said, snuggling closer. Yeah," Ethan said, and was surprised to realize it was true. "I never thought I could have this. A home, a wife, an honest life, but you made me believe it was possible." "We made it possible," Delilah corrected. "Together." In September, a year after they first met, Delilah discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified and thrilled Ethan in equal measure. He was going to be a father, him, a former outlaw with blood on his hands. How was he supposed to raise a child? But Delilah had faith enough for both of them. "You will be a wonderful father," she assured him. "You are already a wonderful husband. This is just the next step." The pregnancy was not easy. Delilah was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. Ethan fretted over her constantly, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, rubbing her back when the nausea got bad. But as the months passed and her belly grew round with their child, she bloomed. She had never looked more beautiful to him, and he told her so often. "You are just saying that because I am carrying your baby," she would tease. "I am saying it because it is true," he would reply and kiss her until she believed him. In May of 1885, Delilah went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted through the night and into the next day. Ethan paced the floor outside their bedroom, where Margaret and the midwife were helping Delilah, and prayed to a God he was not sure he believed in. "Please," he begged silently, "please let her be okay. I cannot lose her. I will do anything. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, he heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby. Minutes later, Margaret emerged, smiling through her tears. "You have a son," she said, "and Delilah is fine. Exhausted, but fine." Ethan nearly collapsed with relief. He rushed into the bedroom and found Delilah propped up on pillows, sweaty and pale but smiling. In her arms was a tiny, wrinkled creature with a shock of dark hair. "Meet your son," she said softly. Ethan approached slowly, almost afraid. He had held guns and reins and tools, but never something so small and fragile. Delilah placed the baby in his arms, and Ethan looked down at his son. The baby's eyes were closed, his little fists waving in the air. He had Delilah's nose and mouth, but Ethan could see himself in the shape of the ears and the stubborn set of the chin. "He is perfect," Ethan whispered. "What should we name him?" Delilah asked. They had discussed names, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at his son, Ethan knew. "Samuel," he said. "After my grandfather, he was the only good man in my family." "Samuel Morgan," Delilah said, testing it out. "I like it." "Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the world." Being a father changed Ethan in ways he had not expected. Every decision he made, he thought about how it would affect his son. Every dollar he earned went toward making their home better, safer, more comfortable. He worked harder than he ever had, driven by a need to provide that he had never felt before. Samuel was a good baby, easy and happy. He smiled early and often, and the sound of his laughter became Ethan's favorite thing in the world. Ethan would come home from the logging camp covered in sawdust and dirt, and Samuel would reach for him anyway, not caring about the mess. Delilah went back to teaching when Samuel was 6 months old, and Margaret looked after the baby during the day. It was hard being away from him, but they needed the money, and Delilah loved her work. She was a natural teacher, patient and creative, and her students adored her. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Work, home, family. Simple things that had once seemed impossible. Ethan found he did not miss his old life at all. The excitement, the danger, the constant moving. All of it paled in comparison to the quiet joy of watching his son take his first steps, or the contentment of falling asleep next to his wife. But the past has a way of catching up, no matter how far you run. It was a sunny afternoon in July, almost 2 years after they arrived in Cascade. Ethan was in town picking up supplies when he heard a voice that made his blood run cold. "Well, I will be damned. Ethan Morgan, as I live and breathe." Ethan turned slowly. Standing outside the general store was a man he had not seen in 3 years. Cal Wheeler, one of the men he used to ride with. Cal was older now, grayer, but still had that mean gleam in his eye. "Cal," Ethan said carefully, his hand instinctively moving toward where his gun used to hang. But he was not wearing a gun anymore. He had locked it away in a trunk under the bed, a relic of another life. "Heard you were dead," Cal said, approaching with a grin that did not reach his eyes. "Word was Holloway got you up in Montana." "You heard wrong," Cal laughed. "Guess I did. So what are you doing in this nowhere town?" "Looking to set up a new job. I could use a good partner. There is a bank in Portland that would be easy pickings." "I am not in that life anymore," Ethan said. "I have got a family now, an honest job. I am done." Cal's grin faded. "Done? You cannot just be done, Ethan. Once you are in this life, you are in it forever. You know too much, seen too much. The law does not care if you have gone straight. They will still hang you for what you did." "I will take that risk." "And what about your family? If the law finds you, they will suffer too. Your wife, your kid." "You thought about that?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I've got nothing to say to you, Cal, and I would appreciate it if you would move along and forget you saw me." "That is not very friendly," Cal said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "I could make trouble for you, Ethan." One word to the territorial marshal, and this nice little life you built comes crashing down. It was blackmail, pure and simple. Ethan felt rage building in his chest, the old violent impulses rising up. It would be so easy to put his fist through Cal's smirking face, to make him regret ever speaking to him. But that was not who he was anymore. He had promised Delilah, promised himself, that he would be better. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "Just a little insurance. Say $500. To keep my memory from getting too good. $500. It was most of their savings, the money they had been putting aside to expand the house, maybe buy some livestock. But what choice did he have? "Fine," Ethan said, "but I do not have that kind of money on me. I will need a few days to get it together." "You have got until Friday," Cal said. "Meet me here same time, and Ethan, do not even think about running. I will find you, and next time the price will be higher." Ethan watched Cal swagger away and felt the weight of his past settling back onto his shoulders. He had been fooling himself, thinking he could ever really escape. That night, he told Delilah everything. She listened quietly, her face grave, Samuel asleep on her lap. "We will pay him," she said when he finished. "If that is what it takes to keep us safe, we will pay." "And what about next time?" Ethan asked bitterly. "Men like Cal do not stop with one payment. He will keep coming back, bleeding us dry until there is nothing left." "Then we will figure something else out. But Ethan, look at me." She waited until he met her eyes. "You are not that man anymore. We are not running. This is our home. We will find a way." Ethan wanted to believe her, but he had dealt with men like Cal too many times. They did not stop. They could not stop. It was in their nature, like a wolf that had tasted blood. On Friday, Ethan met Cal as arranged. He handed over $500 in cash, every cent they had saved. Cal counted it with infuriating slowness, then tucked it into his coat. "Pleasure doing business with you," he said. "I will be in touch." As Ethan watched him leave, he made a decision. He could not keep living like this, waiting for the next demand, the next threat. He needed to end this once and for all. That night, after Delilah and Samuel were asleep, Ethan went to the trunk under the bed and took out his gun. It felt strange in his hand now, heavier than he remembered. But it was still familiar, the weight and balance as natural as breathing. He found Cal in a saloon on the edge of town, drinking and playing cards with some rough-looking characters. Ethan walked up to the table and slammed his hand down, scattering the cards. "We need to talk," he said. "Outside. Now." Cal looked annoyed, but he saw something in Ethan's face that made him comply. They walked out into the dark street, away from prying eyes and ears. "What is this about?" Cal demanded. "You already paid." "This is about making sure you never come back," Ethan said. "That you never threaten my family again," Cal laughed. "What are you going to do, kill me? You have gone soft, Morgan, I can see it. You would not have the guts." He was right, Ethan realized. The old him would not have hesitated. But the new him, the man Delilah had helped him become, could not do it. Could not kill a man in cold blood, no matter how much he deserved it. "You are right," Ethan said, holstering his gun. "I have gone soft, but that does not mean I am helpless." He had spent the last 2 days thinking, planning, and he had come up with something better than violence. "I talked to the sheriff," Ethan continued. "Told him everything. About my past, about you, about the blackmail. He is willing to grant me immunity in exchange for information about the gangs operating in this territory. And you, Cal, are going to be the first name I give him." Cal's face went white. "You would not." "I already did. There are deputies waiting for you back at that saloon. You can run if you want, but you will not get far, or you can come quietly, maybe cut a deal of your own." For a moment, Cal looked like he might try to draw, but then he sagged, the fight going out of him. "Damn you, Morgan. Damn me all you want, just stay away from my family." The deputies took Cal away and Ethan went home to his wife. He told her what he had done, expecting her to be angry that he had revealed his past to the law. But instead, she hugged him tight. "I am proud of you," she whispered. "You chose the hard way the right way. That takes more courage than pulling a trigger ever did." The next few weeks were tense. Ethan had to testify before a judge, tell his whole story. It was humiliating and frightening, laying bare all his sins for strangers to judge. But the judge was fair, and the sheriff spoke on Ethan's behalf, vouching for his reformation. In the end, Ethan was granted a full pardon for his past crimes in exchange for his cooperation. The wanted posters were pulled down. He was finally, truly free. Life returned to normal after that, or as normal as it ever got. Samuel grew into a curious, adventurous toddler who loved animals and the outdoors. Delilah thrived in her teaching, and Ethan was promoted to crew chief at the logging company. 2 years later, Delilah gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Clara. She had Delilah's auburn hair and Ethan's gray eyes, and she was the princess of the family from the moment she arrived. Samuel doted on his baby sister, always wanting to hold her and play with her. Ethan built an addition onto the house, giving the children their own rooms. He planted an orchard and built a chicken coop. Slowly, year by year, their little homestead grew into something substantial. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ethan took Delilah back to the meadow in the mountains where they had pledged themselves to each other. They left the children with Margaret and spent a night under the stars, just the two of them. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked as they lay together, watching the fire burn down to embers. "Giving up your old life for me?" "Never," Delilah said firmly. "You gave me the courage to choose my own path, to fight for what I wanted instead of accepting what I was given. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." "You saved me," Ethan said. "I was headed for a bad end and you gave me a reason to change." "We saved each other," Delilah said and kissed him. "That is what love is, two broken people helping each other heal." The years passed in a blur of happiness. Samuel grew tall and strong, helping his father with the farm work and learning to handle timber. Clara was bright and curious, always asking questions and reading every book she could get her hands on. Ethan and Delilah welcomed 2 more children, twin boys they named William and James. Ethan's reputation in Cascade grew. He was known as a hard worker, an honest man, a good father. People came to him for advice, for help with projects, for a loan when times were tight. He never forgot where he had come from, and he never turned away someone in need. Delilah became the head teacher at the school, respected and admired throughout the community. She pushed for longer school terms, better books, equal education for boys and girls. She made a difference in dozens of young lives. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan built Delilah the library she had always dreamed of. It was just a small addition to the house, but it had floor-to-ceiling shelves that he filled with books ordered from Portland and San Francisco. When he showed it to her, Delilah wept with joy. "How did I get so lucky?" she asked, wrapping her arms around him. "I am the lucky one," Ethan said. "You saw something in me that no one else did. You believed I could be better, and you made me want to try." They stood in that library, surrounded by books and possibilities, and Ethan thought about the path that had led them here. From a saloon in Miles City to a homestead in Oregon. From an outlaw on the run to a respected member of the community. It had not been easy, and there had been times when he thought they would not make it, but they had. Together, they had built something beautiful out of broken pieces. Samuel grew into a fine young man, serious and responsible. At 18, he announced his intention to study law, to become an attorney who could help people navigate the complexities of the legal system. Ethan could not have been prouder. Clara became a teacher like her mother, taking a position at a school in a nearby town. She wrote home often, her letters full of enthusiasm and stories about her students. The twins were wild cards, always getting into mischief but good-hearted. They talked about becoming loggers like their father, or maybe ranchers, or possibly miners. They had not decided yet, but Ethan was not worried. They had time. In the spring of 1900, on a beautiful May morning, Ethan woke up next to his wife in the house they had built together. He was 42 now, and she was 39. They had been married for 17 years, together for 17 years and 9 months. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime, and sometimes it felt like no time at all. He watched Delilah sleep, her auburn hair now threaded with silver laugh lines around her eyes. She was even more beautiful to him now than she had been that first night in the saloon, because now he knew her completely. Her strengths and weaknesses, her fears and dreams, her stubborn loyalty and fierce love. She opened her eyes and smiled at him. "Morning." "Morning," he said and kissed her softly. "I love you. I love you too." Simple words, but they meant everything. They got up and started their day the same as thousands of other days. Breakfast with the twins who were still at home. Work in the orchard and garden. Neighbors stopping by to chat. The ordinary, precious routine of a life well lived. That evening they sat on their porch watching the sunset. The same kind of sunset they had watched in that mountain meadow all those years ago, when they had pledged themselves to each other. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Delilah asked. "When you walked into the saloon, all the time," Ethan admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding past, to never stopping in Miles City at all. I am glad you stopped. Me too. Best decision I ever made." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Delilah said, "Samuel wrote. He is coming home for the summer, and Clara is bringing someone she wants us to meet, a young man she has been courting." "Our children are growing up," Ethan said. "They are. Soon there will be grandchildren." The thought made Ethan smile. Grandchildren. A whole new generation to love and teach and watch grow. He reached for Delilah's hand and she took it, their fingers interlacing as naturally as breathing. "You made me want to change," he said, echoing words he had thought but never quite spoken that first night. "When I looked at you, I saw everything I could be instead of everything I was. You gave me hope." "You did the hard work," Delilah said. "I just believed in you." That was enough. That was everything. As the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here. From outlaws and saloon girls to homesteaders and teachers. From people running from their pasts to people building toward their futures, it had not been easy. There had been struggles and setbacks, moments of doubt and fear, but through it all they had each other, and that had made all the difference. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Samuel became a successful attorney in Portland, handling cases for people who could not otherwise afford representation. Clara married her young man, a farmer named Daniel, and they settled in a town not far from Cascade. The twins eventually decided on logging, working alongside their father until Ethan finally retired at 55. Grandchildren came, first one, then two, then a whole tribe of them. Ethan and Delilah's house was always full of noise and laughter when the grandchildren visited. Ethan taught them to ride and shoot and fish. Delilah taught them to read and write and think for themselves. The community of Cascade prospered, growing from a small logging town into a real city. But Ethan and Delilah's homestead remained the same, a quiet refuge where family gathered and memories were made. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family came together to celebrate. 4 children, 8 grandchildren, aunts and uncles and cousins and friends. They roasted a pig and danced to fiddle music and told stories long into the night. Samuel stood up to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that it is never too late to change, that love is worth fighting for, and that family is the most important thing in the world. Thank you for showing us how to live with courage and kindness." Everyone drank, and Ethan felt his eyes sting with unexpected tears. He looked around at all these people, this family he and Delilah had created, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later, when the party had wound down and the grandchildren were sleeping in every available space, Ethan and Delilah slipped away to their bedroom. They lay together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of their full house. "We did good," Delilah whispered. "We did," Ethan agreed. "We did real good." As Ethan drifted off to sleep, his wife in his arms and his family safe around him, he thought back one last time to that desperate man who had stumbled into a saloon in Miles City, Montana, so many years ago. That man had been running from everything and toward nothing. He had been lost and angry and convinced he was beyond redemption. But then he had met a woman with hazel eyes and auburn hair who had seen something worth saving in him, who had taken a chance on an outlaw and helped him become a better man. Not because she was perfect or because she had all the answers, but because she loved him enough to believe he could change. And he had. Not all at once, not easily, but steadily and surely, one choice at a time. He had become the man she believed him to be, and in doing so, he had found the life he never knew he wanted. It had all started with a moment of kindness in a saloon. A woman who had lied to protect a stranger, and from that small seed, an entire life had grown. A love story that spanned decades and generations. A legacy of change and hope and second chances. As Ethan finally fell asleep, his last conscious thought was simple but profound. Sometimes the best thing you can be is not the person you were, but the person someone else believes you can become. And that was worth everything. The years rolled on with gentle inevitability. Ethan and Delilah grew old together in the house they had built, surrounded by love and laughter. Their children remained close, building their own lives but always coming home. The grandchildren grew into fine young people, carrying forward the values their grandparents had instilled. Ethan's hair turned completely white, and he moved a little slower than he used to. But his eyes were still sharp and his hands still steady. Delilah's auburn hair became silver, but her smile was as bright as ever and her mind as keen. On quiet evenings, they would sit together on their porch and watch the sun set over the Oregon hills. Sometimes they talked, sharing memories of their long life together. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, two people who knew each other so well that words were unnecessary. "Do you have any regrets?" Delilah asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. Ethan thought about it seriously. "Only one," he said finally. "I regret that I did not meet you sooner, that I wasted so many years being someone I am not proud of." "Those years made you who you are," Delilah said. "Without them, you would not have appreciated what we built together." "Maybe," Ethan allowed. "What about you? Any regrets?" "Not a single one. Every choice I made led me to you, to this life, to this family. How could I regret any of that?" They shared a kiss, soft and sweet, the kiss of two people who had loved each other through decades of joy and struggle and everything in between. Time continued its march. Samuel had 3 children and a thriving law practice. Clara had 5 children and a reputation as the best teacher in the county. William became a successful timber baron, ethical and fair in his business dealings. James married a woman from California and moved south, starting a ranch that prospered. Ethan and Delilah celebrated their 30th anniversary, their 40th, their 45th. Each one was a testament to the strength of the love they had built that first night in Miles City, when an outlaw and a saloon girl had found each other and decided to try for something better. On the morning of their 46th anniversary, Ethan woke early. Delilah was still sleeping beside him, her breathing deep and even. He studied her face in the early light, memorizing every line and wrinkle, every precious detail. He thought about all the mornings they had woken up together, thousands of them, each one a gift. He thought about their children and grandchildren, about the life they had built from nothing but hope and determination. And he thought about that young woman in a green dress who had looked at a wanted man and decided to save him anyway, who had seen past the guns and the scars to the person underneath, who had loved him enough to help him change. Delilah stirred and opened her eyes. "Morning," she murmured, her voice rusty with sleep. "Morning, my love," Ethan said and gathered her close. They lay together as the sun rose, painting their bedroom in shades of gold and amber. Outside, they could hear the world waking up, birds singing, the wind in the trees, the distant lowing of cattle. "Happy anniversary," Delilah said. "Happy anniversary," Ethan replied. 46 years. 46 years, Delilah echoed, "and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Me too. Every single moment." They got up and prepared for the day. Their children and grandchildren would be arriving soon for another celebration. There would be food and music and laughter, the sounds of a family that loved each other. But first, Ethan and Delilah took a moment for themselves. They walked out to the orchard Ethan had planted so many years ago, now mature and productive. They stood beneath the apple trees, holding hands, and watched the sun climb higher in the sky. "I am the luckiest man alive," Ethan said. "I am the luckiest woman," Delilah countered. They smiled at each other, both knowing it did not matter who was luckier. What mattered was that they had found each other, had chosen each other, had built a life together that was rich with meaning and love. As they walked back to the house to greet their arriving family, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. He had been given a second chance at life, and he had made the most of it. He had loved and been loved. He had raised good children and been a part of a community. He had worked hard and lived honestly. But most importantly, he had kept the promise he made to himself that night in the mountain meadow. He had become the man Delilah believed he could be. He had changed, not just his circumstances, but his very nature. And in doing so, he had found a happiness he never knew existed. That evening, as the celebration wound down and the last of the grandchildren were tucked into bed, Ethan and Delilah stood on their porch one more time. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars that had watched over them through nearly 5 decades of marriage. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. "For what?" Delilah asked. "For everything. For seeing me when I could not see myself. For believing in me when I did not believe in myself. For giving me a reason to change and a life worth living." Delilah leaned her head on his shoulder. "You make it sound like I did all the work. But Ethan, you are the one who chose to change. You did the hard work of becoming a better man. I just loved you through it." "That was everything," Ethan said. "That was all I needed." They stood together under the stars, an old couple at the end of a long journey, and felt nothing but gratitude for the road that had brought them here. From a saloon in Montana to a homestead in Oregon. From fear and running to love and belonging. From broken and lost to whole and found. It had been a good life. No, more than good. It had been extraordinary, not because of wealth or fame or grand adventures, but because of the simple, profound act of two people choosing each other every single day. As they finally went inside, Ethan took one last look at the land they had cultivated, the house they had built, the life they had created. And he smiled, knowing that whatever time they had left, they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else, because that was what love was. Not just the passionate beginning or the comfortable middle, but the whole journey from start to finish. And theirs had been a journey worth taking. The story that began with, "You make me want to change," had become a story of actual change, of redemption and growth and love that endured through all challenges. And as Ethan Morgan fell asleep that night, his wife safe in his arms, he knew that he would not change a single thing about the life they had built together. It was, in every way that mattered, a perfect ending to a story that had started with hope and ended with fulfillment. An outlaw who became a good man, a saloon girl who became a beloved teacher and matriarch. Two people who found each other in the wildness of the frontier and built something lasting and true. And if their grandchildren sometimes asked how Grandma and Grandpa fell in love, Delilah would smile and say, "I met him in a saloon one night and he changed my life." And Ethan would add, "She saved my life, and then she taught me how to live it." And that was the truth, simple and complete. A love story for the ages, played out against the backdrop of the American West. Two people who defied the odds, overcame their pasts, and created a future neither had dared to dream of. And they lived, as all the best stories promise, happily ever after.